I think it would be good for us to look deeper into argumentative essays and like what the actual paragraph structure would look like in a lot more detail. So we looked at different kinds of supporting ideas, explain, describe, reasons, examples. Not going to spend too much time on that. And then we looked at identifying the unrelated sentence. So this exercise was really good for you guys to recognize that the topic sentence is what you're going to link all of your supporting details to. And the way that you're going to know that there is a redundant sentence or a sentence that does not belong is by looking back at the topic sentence and seeing that it doesn't align with that, right? So the number of continents should be a simple fact, but the number you identify depends on where you live, right? So we looked at that and then we decided Panama is the southern end of North America, but it used to be part of Colombia. We decided that was the redundant sentence, right? So all your paragraphs are going to be different arguments, right? But all three of those arguments are going to directly support your thesis. So it's kind of like an umbrella, right? That's your thesis is an umbrella. Yeah. Your thesis is like an umbrella, right? So saying elementary school students should not be using social media. Okay, and then you have three different things under that umbrella, three different arguments. So one, it's too addictive for kids. Two, kids don't know how to decide when things are dangerous. Three, cyberbullying, right? So those are three different arguments that answer that question and are directly supporting that thesis. And then under that, your body paragraphs, you might have 2 to 3 supporting details per paragraph. However, argumentative essays should also consider and explain differing points of view regarding the topic. Depending on the length of the assignment, students should dedicate 1 or 2 paragraphs of an argumentative essay discussing conflicting opinions on the topic. So this is how some people like to do their argumentative essays, right? Dedicating like a paragraph to just talk about the opposing view. I said for the sake of this, we're not going to do that, but in the future, when you get to choose your own topic and write your own argumentative essay, you can have the option to dedicate 1 paragraph to the opposing view and refuting that. So we'll talk about that a bit more later. Okay, so we all understand that 1 paragraph has 1 main argument, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then evidential support. So the first part, the argumentative essay requires well-researched, accurate, detailed, and current information to support the thesis statement and consider other points of view. So well-researched meaning that you're not just going to look it up and click on the first link and then that's going to be the one that you use, right? You want to try to really like delve into the research, look at different websites if you can. Try to structure your questioning when you're like typing it into Google or whatever. Think about how you are writing that. So there is something called confirmation bias. Has anyone heard of that before?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. People display this bias when they select information that supports their views, ignoring contrary information, or when they interpret ambiguous evidence as supporting their existing attitudes. The effect is stronger for desired outcomes for emotionally charged issues and deeply entrenched beliefs. Confirmation bias is unsurmountable for most people, but they can manage it. For example, by education and training.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Devin. So confirmation bias is when you have a belief, you have an opinion, and you specifically go out to only seek evidence that supports your opinion. So if I were to say that social media is bad for kids, and when I go into Google, I'm only going to say, like, give me articles that show how bad social media is for kids. Instead of saying, how would we reword that to have a less biased?
What's up?
So if I want to talk about, if I want to find articles that show that social media is really bad for kids, what is an unbiased way I could reframe that? Yes, Doris.
Like social media pros and cons.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What about statistics?
So another way you can do that is just by typing in the effects of social media on elementary school children or young children, right? Because this can be positive effects or negative effects. From there, if you were to find a positive effect, but you're trying to argue it negatively, now you have an opposing opinion. And if that positive effect were to say that students are able to build friendships better with other kids, you can use that to your advantage by saying, okay, but what if those friendships can be dangerous? Or something like that, right? Try to be as neutral as you can. However, when you really want to go like deep into it, so for example, if you want to find statistics on the number of children that get addicted to social media, in those cases, you can be a bit more biased in your search, right? Because you're looking for something specific. But generally, when you're gathering your evidence, when you're even just deciding which side you're going to be on, it's really good to just be unbiased and be neutral in your searches. Yeah, okay, so factual, logical, statistical, or anecdotal evidence. So when we say anecdotal evidence, are you making up a story from your imagination and using that as evidence? Exactly, right? So it can be experience from yourself or someone else, preferably like someone else that you can like cite, like maybe it's a news article or something. Statistical, we're thinking about like numbers, percentages. Logical, how do you know that an evidence is logical? Sometimes if you go on a website and you're looking at the research, there may be a bibliography for that article at the very end with their work cited. So that can be a good way of seeing, like, are they just making this up or are they using statistics? However, students must consider multiple points of view. What does that mean? Considering the other side of the debate, and also considering like who your audience is, who is going to be reading your essay, who would care about it. So I think we talked about this earlier, but if we're just writing this for the kids, then the elementary school kids, then it might come out a certain way, right? You might say things like, why aren't you playing with your friends and spending time outside? And that would be like the basis of your arguments. But would an adult care about that? Someone who doesn't have kids, or like, why would they care what kids do with their time? So think about like, why would this be important to a kid, an adult, a teenager? A stakeholder is typically it's used in kind of like a business setting where these are people that care about the specific topic, that are meant to care about it because it's going to directly affect them. So organizations that are working with one business, if this business is going bankrupt, all the other organizations are going to be affected by this, right? So in a similar way, the stakeholders of our essays are the people who can be affected by this research, by our argument. So to create that idea of having stakeholders is to make it more diverse. So make your points a bit more like diverse. So for example, what could be a point in this topic that would be mostly catered to children? So what would children care about? What kind of argument would they care about? Losing their friends? Good. What about a teenager? That's a really good point, right? So if they are not doing well in school when they're young, these habits are going to build up and that's going to affect their ability to get into university. What about an adult? Why should an adult care, Devin? Okay, and then yeah, when you are opposing other views, you're not going to go in depth on how the other opinion is just so terrible. You want to draw the emphasis on why your opinion is just more well-informed. Okay, so you're not just kind of like dogging on another person's opinion. Okay, so your conclusion. Yeah, so this is the portion of the essay that will leave the most immediate impression on your reader. This is why a lot of people like to end off their conclusion with something like a little bit of like a rhetorical question or a thought-provoking statement or question. So that is something that the reader can leave with. So that's why it must be the most effective and logical. You don't want to just summarize everything that was stated in your essay. You want to kind of answer the so what question and leave them thinking. So don't introduce any new information. Just synthesize it. Common method for writing an argumentative essay is the 5-paragraph approach. So this is, of course, it's not the only formula for writing these essays. For your age group, I think that is the most appropriate. So in order for your argument to be persuasive, it must use an organizational structure that is perceived as both logical and easy to parse. So there are 3 different kinds of methods that are listed here. You don't have to use these methods, but these are just some classic methods that are used to organize your paragraph structure. So let's take a look at one of this formula. So this is called a Toolman. So this formula allows you guys to build a sturdy logical foundation for your arguments. Okay, we're not going to go into all of this, but this is essentially the format that it uses. So the first part of your paragraph, you're going to state your claim. This is where you explain your overall thesis on the subject. In other words, you make your main argument. So when you're looking at a paragraph structure, your topic sentence is going to make the argument of your paragraph, right? So you want to state your topic. This is where your argument is, okay? Make your main argument. This is what's going to lead the rest of the paragraph. Second part, the data or the grounds. This is where you use the evidence to support your claim. So now you provide the reader with facts that prove your argument is strong. Okay, so first is your claim, then you get into the evidence. Okay, and then the warrant or the bridge. In this section, you explain why or how your data supports the claim. As a result, the underlying assumption that you built your argument on is grounded in reason. Okay, so after you make a claim, after you provide any sort of evidence, bless you, you want to explain why this is relevant and how it supports your claim. Then the next part is backing, your foundation. So here you can provide any additional logic or reasoning that may be necessary to support the warrant. So for some pieces of evidence, it can be very complex, right? Of course, you want to explain it, but sometimes you also want to back it up with something else that you want to add that you feel is necessary or that can make your point stronger. So we are going to look at some ideas of logic in a bit that may use some philosophical stuff as you guys love. And here's an example. So the claim, hybrid cars are an effective strategy to fight pollution. So this would be the topic sentence. Data number 1, driving a private car is a typical citizen's most air polluting activity. Warrant, due to the fact that cars are the largest source of private as opposed to industrial air pollution, switching to hybrid cars should have an impact on fighting pollution. This is their second data point. Each vehicle produced is going to stay on the road for roughly 12 to 15 years. So between your data and warrants, between your first data point and your second data point, you want to make sure there's a transitional word. So in this case, they're just listing it out. So that's why there's no transition, but remember that, okay? Yeah. So each vehicle produced is going to stay on the road for roughly 12 to 15 years. Their warrant, cars generally have a long lifespan, meaning that the decision to switch to a hybrid car will make a long-term impact on pollution levels. Okay, and then they get to their third data point, and now their counterclaim. Instead of focusing on cars, which still encourages an inefficient culture of driving, even as it cuts down on pollution, the nation should focus on building and encouraging the use of mass transit systems. Okay, so this is what the opposing side would say. And this is their rebuttal. While mass transit is an idea that should be encouraged, it is not feasible in many rural and suburban areas, or for people who must commute to work. Thus, hybrid cars are a better solution for much of the nation's population. This would not be an entire body paragraph because there's no sort of like interaction between the sentences or transitions, but these are just the points laid out. But essentially, this would make for a body paragraph, albeit a very longer one. We definitely can't fit all of these into 5 sentences. Actually, one I do want to go over is the classical method because this is one that you're most likely going to learn in school. So the classical method, this is another common way to organize your points. Generally, this was like devised by Aristotle and then a bunch of other people. And yeah, the underlying assumption of classical argumentation is that when all parties understand the issue perfectly, the correct course of action will be clear. So the first one, the introduction. You explain the issue and explain its significance. You should also establish your credibility and topic's legitimacy. Okay, so this is the beginning part of your paragraph. And then you want a statement of background. So this is where you present the vital, contextual, or historical information. So really just kind of adding your supporting details, using the context or information such as examples, things like that. So this is where they have the knowledge. Your proposition. After you provide the reader with contextual knowledge, you are ready to state your claims, which relate to the information you have provided previously. Okay, so your claims are going to be your supporting details, that your 3 different kinds of claims within your paragraph. And now you want to back that up with proof. What is your proof going to be? Exactly. So in the previous structure we looked at, they went straight in with the examples, I think. Like they dove right in. And here, you're using into the topic, what paragraph is going to be about, provide some of the context behind it. So maybe a brief sentence explaining that. Then you're going to get into, you're going to provide some contextual knowledge, get into your example. And yeah, and then after that, you would refute if there are anticipated counter arguments. So this is just one part of your paragraph. So we can say, while this source of evidence says this is why you disagree with that. And then you summarize your main point. So this is going to be your concluding sentence. To kind of like gloss over paragraphs again. Good paragraphing greatly assists your readers in following a piece of writing. So you'll know your paragraph is good if someone else can read it and they know exactly where you're going, if they can just follow it with ease. If you have a bunch of ideas and they're not presented in an organized fashion, you will lose your readers. Yeah, I mean, you really don't have to use like firstly, secondly. You can, but I would say like if you want more advanced writing, try to find ways to transition your sentences. So if you begin to transition into a new idea, this idea will belong to a new paragraph. So if you're talking about the safety of social media for elementary school children, and then you go on to say that it's also bad for their eyes, those two don't really relate to each other, right? It can be a valid idea, but that's how you know that because they're not related, that can be a new paragraph on its own. So yeah, you can have one idea and several bits of supporting evidence. You can also have several points in a single paragraph as long as they relate to the overall topic of the paragraph. If the single points start to get long, then perhaps elaborating on each of them and placing them in their own paragraphs is the route to go. So some of the elements of a paragraph. A paragraph should contain each of the following: unity, coherence, a topic sentence, and adequate development. So we're going to go into each of these and look into them in like more detail. But using these and adapting them to your individual purposes will help you make your really effective paragraph. So the first one, unity. What is unity? You need one major point of discussion per paragraph. Okay, so you're not going to wander off into different ideas. That can be very tempting because you may just have so many ideas, but try to stay focused within them, okay? So that's unity. So coherence, this is when you really just want to make sure all your points are, does anyone know what coherent means? It comes from the word cohesive. Have we ever heard of that word before?
Yes.
Cohesive. So I think we've talked about this before, but an example of cohesive that we see in like science or something, when all the molecules are sticking together and they're making one just big lump of molecules. That is an idea, that's an example of cohesion because it's sticking together, and because it sticks together, they end up working together now into this one lump. And the same way, when we're looking at our essays, right, our supporting details in our paragraph may be different, but because they're all relating to the one main argument, they stick together and they work together. That is what cohesion means. 2 ways that you can create this coherence in your paragraphs. So the first one, logical bridges. So this is when the same idea of a topic is carried over from sentence to sentence. So if you really want to just hone in on one specific idea of, let's say, how, the use of social media is going to affect the children's work ethic or their grades or something like that, That's going to be the main idea of your topic. You don't have to have multiple different supporting ideas. You can stick to that, but that's going to be explained again and again. So that same logic is going to be carried over from like throughout your sentences. Successive sentences can be constructed in parallel form. What this means is that all the sentences that come after that main idea is going to essentially say the same thing, but it's kind of going to be constructed in the same way. So we're really going to look at the same idea, but write it in, not just like repeating or summarizing it over and over again, but essentially just it's kind of like a mirror. When you think of it like being parallel, right? You're just mirroring something. So you're not going to say, for example, kids spend too much time on social media, and that's why their grades are great. Their grades are bad. Their bads are great. Right? Let me think of another example, actually. So if you're saying that their grades are bad because they're spending so much time on social media instead of homework, then that's going to be your main topic. That's what you're going to focus on. There can be another supporting detail for that argument. What's another supporting detail for that argument of why their grades may be bad? So in the first argument, it's a matter of indirect effects. So you're spending less time on your homework, and indirectly that will create bad grades for you. The second one is a more direct effect, like what Dora said, is that it can directly create cognitive effects. So by looking at certain types of content, maybe you're losing brain cells, I don't know. That would be two unparalleled or perpendicular kind of forms, right?